Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Movie Charts, the show where we go over everything box office related, which has been on a bit of a hiatus because there has been no box office to cover. But this past weekend was really the first major weekend, I guess, where new releases came out, more theaters opened, and we got some numbers. And I'm joined today by Ben Campbell to go over the box office. Um, So, if we look at the top five for this past weekend domestically, first place was New Mutants at 7 million. Second was Unhinged at 2.5 million, making dropping only 35%. Um, Third was the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, making $604,000. I think mainly just in Canada. Personal History of David Copperfield did like pretty bad, doing $520,000. And in the fifth spot was Words on Bathroom Walls, making $453,000. So the two big movies this weekend were really Unhinged and New Mutants, I guess. But the main one we're going to be talking about today would be not Unhinged, New Mutants. Debuted to 7 million domestically, like I said, and 9.9 million worldwide. The box office tracking had it around that range. I think it was projected to make around 7 to 10 million. It has a $100 million budget, and
What?
big. That's what the internet says, at least $100 million budget. Um,
I saw 45 to 60 million dollars.
Really, we can look that up at some point in the episode. I can look that up once you start going again or something. And it did have a bigger than expected drop Saturday and Sunday from its Friday numbers. But Ben, all things considered, how do you view New Mutants box office performance this past weekend?
Well, going into the weekend, uh, people are expecting 5 to 7 million dollars. Uh,
Yeah.
which honestly, I think just on paper, because we're kind of looking at stuff on paper here,
Mhm.
um, it wouldn't have been amazing. But after Thursday night, they changed the projections to 7 to 10 million, and it ended up doing with seven. So I do think that there is a good and a bad here. So
Mhm.
I'm going to go over the bad first, and then you can talk, and because I feel we're probably going to have some similar things to say.
Yeah.
So I feel for this film, it kind of needed to double Unhinged what they made last weekend, not
Yeah.
to be embarrassing. So I think
Mhm.
$8 million would have been held as a very good. Um, and I do think that that was in striking distance. I do
Mhm.
think that $8 to $10 million was possible, because a lot of people were on the fence. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I think the deciding factor would have been the Rotten Tomatoes score, um, and also the director being really stupid on Instagram, and that could have turned a lot of people away as well.
Mhm.
Which is totally on the director. It's all everything is his fault,
Mhm.
when it comes to that. So as for like the potential of the film, I think 10 million, anything over $10 million would have been wonderful, like truly, truly excellent, and it would have been an amazing sign for Tenet, and the New Mutants itself. If it was able, now we're kind of getting into hypotheticals. So if it would have been able to match its original projections of about 17 to $25 million, um, I feel that would have been a dream come true. Like truly, that would have been like an amazing sign for the market. It would have been a brilliant, like it would have. I think it would have ensured movie going could stay going through the end of the year. And this is also a major hypothetical, but if it was able to beat Dark Phoenix, which I kind of did a bit of like number touting. I kind of looked at it because with the amount of showtimes and stuff that were cut, and with social distancing and all that, I think without the pandemic, this film would have been within striking distance of Dark Phoenix, beating Dark Phoenix opening weekend. That film's opening weekend number. I think that would have ensured strong box office through COVID times. Unfortunately, look, that simply just didn't happen. $7 million, the number itself, we're going to get into. It's not that bad, but I think if it wanted to be held as good, it just needed to do a million more.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think 7 million is a little weak and disappointing. And the worldwide number, it worldwide made pretty much what people were hoping it would make domestically, making 9.9 million this past weekend. I agree. I think the Rotten Tomatoes score definitely made a lot of people not want to go. There's obviously more consideration being put in going to the theaters now than there was before. Before it was more like, hey, let's go see this movie. Now it's like you kind of have to make sure it's worth it because you're kind of putting yourself at risk in some ways. I think especially when people saw that Rotten Tomatoes score, they thought it's not worth it. And as you said, some of the comments by the director Josh Boone were very insensitive and probably turned off some people from ever wanting to support the film.
Yeah. So I will say this: I've seen the film. I've seen New Mutants, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the crucial flaw that they made in putting this film out there is that they didn't screen it for critics.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a very small amount of people who've actually seen the film, and an even smaller amount who are able to review the Rotten Tomatoes. And so they're largely giving it because here's the thing: the film is like you could be extra critical of it if you want. You
Yeah.
really could because it's a first draft of the film. This film didn't have reshoots, and every single film that's ever made in Hollywood, this movie right here, that movie right there, Ant-Man and the Wasp, all of these movies have reshoots.
Yeah.
It's not like a film is done after the first try. Every film does reshoots. And I feel like New Mutants is proof that every film needs reshoots because it very much feels like a first draft of the film. I do think they were definitely going to change some things because a lot of it is weaker than others.
Mhm.
Um, and if you wanted to be extra critical of the film, you 100% could. But if you want to just sit back and enjoy it, you definitely can. However, I don't think that a lot of top critics on Rotten Tomatoes are X-Men fans, so I don't think that they care. Um, and if more X-Men, if this had been more available to like 300 critics, as it would, I don't think it would have gotten like 70% or something like that. But I think something in the 50s is definitely reasonable. And that's not amazing either, but I mean, something in the 50s doesn't necessarily repel audiences. So I
Yeah.
think that it unfortunately made the mistake of not screening for critics, and then everything from there just completely collapsed.
Yeah, and I don't think the critics liked not getting screenings. I don't know if you saw this, but because they didn't get screeners, and that means they would have to go to theaters to see it, a lot of critics said that they were not going to review the film, and they were advocating other critics to not review the film. Which I think if more people saw it, I do think it would be closer to a 50% just because it seems like a mixed film. Like
It's
people
average, yeah.
likely,
Because
yeah,
even as more people are seeing it, it's in the 30s now.
yeah, it's going up slowly.
Yeah.
So I do think
There's one more thing with that.
yeah,
It's if critics like to be treated well. So you know that Mission Impossible movie that Brad Bird made?
yeah, I forget what it's called, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit of a weak. Like it's okay, but it's kind of a bit of a weak movie from a story perspective. Very strong visuals.
Mhm.
However, critics were flown out to, I think it was, I'm not sure where they shot, but one of those countries,
Yeah.
and they were flown out there to see the film for the press screening. And so it got like 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it still
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
Critics like to be treated well. If you treat critics well, they will treat you well in return. That's
Mhm.
kind of why you see like some films that get early access from critics will have amazing reviews, or even just solid. Like Ghost in the Shell had like 70 to 80 when like a small group of critics saw it. Same with like Mother had something very high, but then as more people saw it, that plummeted.
Mhm.
Um, so I think if you treat critics well, uh, they're more favorable towards the film, and they were not treated well here.
Yeah. I do think though, if like say Disney slash Fox like brought all the critics like to a quarantine Hawaii vacation and showed them New Mutants, I do think it would still be mixed. I don't think it would be coming out with like a 80 or 90%. I don't
No,
know
I
what
think
their
something in the
experience.
50s or the 60s.
Yeah, yeah, it would probably be closer to there. Um, just because it does seem like such a mixed film. But looking at how it's doing right now, um, how do you think it's going to do in the long run, like its final potential gross?
Yeah, so I do think there is a good here. I think that for a pandemic, only at um, half of the screens that it would have had without the pandemic. It only opened at about 2,100. It probably would have gotten a proper wide release without it. As well as getting those showrooms, you know, they have to operate at 30 to 50% capacity.
Yeah.
Um, about so to be fair, without this pandemic, they only made about a quarter of the amount that they would have, which is roughly about 25 to $28 million, and that's in striking distance of Dark Phoenix. So I do think that if it had been able to open, it would have maybe done. It probably wouldn't have landed in the teens. I think it would have gotten into the 20s at least, because it's an X-Men film, and there wouldn't have been a threat of coronavirus. Um, However, with the limited showrooms, it isn't necessarily awful. It's just a small bit embarrassing. So my final domestic projection for the film is 25 to $30 million. And the reason it's that high, in my opinion, is because Unhinged had really strong staying power. So I'll get to that in a minute when I talk about Unhinged. And my final worldwide projection is 40 to $55 million,
Okay. Well, my
which I don't think is like horrible.
no, that wouldn't be horrible, I guess. But my final gross domestically is 20 million, 20 to 25 maybe if it has good legs. I do think Tenet next or this weekend is going to be cutting its legs off pretty intensely. Um, and my final worldwide prediction, I actually put a little bit higher than you. I put 60 to 65 million.
That'd be great. Yeah. You know, I do think that next weekend is very crucial for Tenet. We're going to basically, like with Tenet's China and America, US opening, we're going to really have a feeling. So we have to have our fingers crossed for that as well. But it's also going to be massive for the New Mutants, depending on the drop, because Dark Phoenix had a drop of 72% in the second weekend.
Yeah.
You know, New Mutants can't have that. But that's why I said, like for the rest of the box office, Unhinged held steadily, which bodes really well for the New Mutants not dropping over 50%, which is crucial. That film
Mhm.
cannot drop more than 50%, or it is done.
I
It's done
do
if it drops over 50%.
I do think it will drop more than 50% just because I don't think there's going to be multiple people, like people going to the theater multiple times in a weekend. And I do think if people are going to the theaters, that Tenet is going to be most people's priorities. Unhinged, I don't know. I could see Unhinged bringing in a different crowd than New Mutants would, so that's why it may have held well. But I don't know. Tenet and New Mutants, I feel like have similar crossover, so I do think it will drop more than 50%.
But I do think that that could work in the New Mutants' favor, because what has limited capacity and is very likely to sell out? Tenet. What's going to be available? New Mutants.
That's true. Yeah. New Mutants also has the drive-in advantage, which Tenet will not be playing at in a lot
No,
of
it
places.
does not.
But
So, when it comes to next weekend at the domestic box office, it's kind of throwdown time. It's showtime. After months, 6 months nearly of guessing, we're finally going to find out what the audience is like for a big theatrical blockbuster. So,
yeah,
Tenet is currently projected to have 15 to $35 million in its debut weekend. We couldn't find out the exact number of the amount of screens it was opening in. I
yeah,
couldn't find it out, and you said you couldn't find it out either. But we know
no,
it's not opening in any of the major cities in the country. Uh, the number could have a potential boost with IMAX showings, which I predict will be very strong. Having seen the film Tenet, I've seen Tenet as well.
hmm
It's like you see this film in a cinema, or you seriously shouldn't bother. Especially in IMAX, if you can, you should seriously see it in IMAX. I can't stress that enough. But again, if you can't, that's understandable. It's just like there's just no point in seeing the movie. It's medium at best. Um, uh, when it comes to domestic, it's like the industry is projecting it could play for a very long time, 150 million to 300 million dollars. They're saying. I think they just want to make Warner Brothers feel better. I don't think
Yeah,
there's any chance of those numbers happening.
that's a huge
But
range.
it's a huge range. Yeah, like 100. That's 150 million dollars of
Yeah,
you know like margin of error there. So I'm not even sure if it'll reach 150. I
yeah.
just don't know.
I'm not completely sure either. It does, like we mentioned earlier, it's not playing at drive-ins, which is a stupid decision. I know Nolan likes to preserve the theater experience, but there are, especially in the two major cities, I don't know how many drive-ins there would be in New York or New York City, but Los Angeles, there's some drive-ins where you have a big movie-going audience there who have been going to drive-ins. Drive-ins was reported to be a big reason for Unhinged's success at the box office. So not and there are some movie buffs who would be like, I'm not going to see Tenet at a drive-in, but I do think the majority of the audience doesn't really care how they see the movie.
Yeah.
So I think they're cutting off a decent bit of profit there, where pirating could, if they don't care about watching it at a drive-in and they don't want it getting spoiled, they could potentially pirate it, which I believe it's already being pirated by some people. I do think it's already hit the pirating circle.
Yeah, I would not advise watching a version of that film that was taken on a phone.
Yeah,
Again, I didn't like the film. Well, look, I did like it, but I didn't love it. However, I cannot stress how important it is to see it in a cinema. I
hmm
can't stress that enough. So I'm going to get into my projections for the film. Do you have your domestic and worldwide
I
projections?
do.
Yeah?
Yes. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I think I'm going to talk about the worldwide more after I'm going to talk about its opening. It's what's going to be expected for China. But what I said with its opening weekend, I think maybe anywhere from 25 to 40 million dollars.
hmm
Uh, and then I think as for the film, like in the long run, uh, domestically 105 to 120 million dollars. If everything goes amazingly, I can't stress that enough. Like if everything goes so well, that's the type of numbers that it could do. $300 million is not happening unless it plays for years.
Yeah. That's more domestically than I think Inception made. So I don't know how
Yeah,
Tenet's going to do that.
I know because especially because here's the thing. Having seen the film, look, I don't live in a COVID hotspot, so
hmm
I'd be able to see it a second time, even though I don't really want to. I just want to understand it more. However, if I was living in a COVID hotspot and I already risked it once to see Tenet, I wouldn't risk seeing it again just so I could understand it more. I'd
Yeah.
probably just not. I'd probably just wait to PVOD, having already had the experience. Okay, I've done it, and I'm not going to do it again because it's too dangerous, and I didn't really fall in love with the film. You're seeing people not falling in love with the film again. Everyone's different. There's a lot of people who do love it, but I think the major consensus is it's fine, and I think a lot of people are going to feel that way too. Um, so I'm not sure if repeat business is going to be amazing unless you live in the middle of the country.
Yeah. And regarding its opening weekend, it does start playing August 31st here in the US in a lot of places. But do you know if
Oh,
they are rolling in everything from Monday to Thursday into the opening weekend, or are they sticking to Thursday to Sunday as the opening weekend?
well, they included for the worldwide debut. They included with it opened on Wednesday, so I saw it last Wednesday, and they included that gross uh, in the opening weekend for
Yeah.
they included it. However, since it's also it's a holiday weekend in the US, isn't it? Labor
It is
Day.
Labor Day, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what could likely happen is when Alita came out for Valentine's Day weekend,
Mhm.
and it had $40 million by the end of the weekend. But that's because it started playing early. I think it started on the Wednesday, and it was able to play through the Monday. So
Yeah.
I think what could happen is Tenet could make say $25 million for the 3 day, but then for the whole week, like with what happened with Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins made $32 million for the whole week, 20 for the 3 day. I think that's likely the type of number you're going to see reported instead of the whole thing together because it's not the weekend gross.
Yeah, that would make sense. And I do think not enough people are talking about this for Tenet's box office this weekend. Labor Day is a historically pretty horrible weekend to open a film, just
Bad,
because
really bad.
that's when most people are getting back into like school and work and stuff. It's not a prime time to go to the theater. And here in the US, there is, believe it or not, a lot of people going back to school, campuses going back to high school and everything, getting ready to go back to school. I don't know how much of a priority it's going to be to go to a movie theater to see Tenet at this point.
Not not only that, but you have, first off, you have the films already playing, and they could see a huge drop, but they might not.
Yeah.
You have the films already playing. You have Mulan coming out on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
You have I'm Thinking of Ending Things. You have a lot of series already on Netflix, like Trinket Season 2, which people might not have like watched all of, stuff like that. You also have The Boys coming out, Season 2 of The Boys. And what else? There's something else. There's more.
There's Mulan, Boys Season 2, Tenet.
I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
There's probably another thing that I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yeah.
There's definitely one other thing, but I forget what it is.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it too, but there's a lot of options. So if you don't feel safe going to a movie theater, you do not have to. You're not going to be starved for options. The biggest opening weekend for Labor Day is the Halloween reboot, the Rob Zombie Halloween, and made like 29 million. Like that's the type of numbers we're dealing with. I think Tenet could not. I think Tenet could maybe still hold. Might not be able to beat that. I think Halloween might actually keep that record.
Did the It films come out on Labor Day weekend, or was that another?
No, the weekend after.
The weekend after, okay. Yeah, Labor Day is a weekend. I think the other thing, even though it's not a movie, maybe the Avengers game, which is also coming out that weekend.
Oh yes, it's the Avengers game. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wait, you already gave your domestic predictions, right, for how much it would do?
Yeah. I will say there's one thing to note, and that's that next weekend will pretty much make or break Tenet with its debut both in China and the US.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's opening China.
Next weekend is vital. But like we're seeing, like the reports came out today that Wonder Woman 1984 has a 2.5-hour runtime.
Oh, really?
Leaks. Yeah. Like, first off, that's an insane runtime. I'm curious to see, because it seems like a pretty basic movie.
It does.
It doesn't seem like it warrants 2.5 hours. But reports like that typically come out because a movie is going to come out. So I think they must be confident enough that Tenet will do well if they're still moving ahead with Wonder Woman. I would think that everyone would be waiting.
Yeah. The head of already, I think, came out and seems pretty confident in at least talking about the international debut where it made, I think, 53 million this past weekend.
I'm going to get to that now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you can keep going. That's the next thing I'm going to do.
Well, in terms of my domestic predictions, I think around 28, maybe 30 million for an opening weekend. And overall domestically, I put it at 165 to 170 million, just because I do think it is going to have decent legs. There's not anything, unlike New Mutants, where it has Tenet in its following weekend. Tenet's not going to have much until Wonder Woman, which is multiple weeks away.
I think you're right about that, but then that's also a good thing for the New Mutants, because it could see a huge drop-off this weekend. So could Unhinged. They could both see massive drops this weekend, like maybe like 60 or 70. But after next weekend, they could maybe even see increases in gross. They might not even see a drop at all. They could, because again, this is like a new era. We haven't seen anything like this, so we're not sure what box office could look like. So it could be like Christmas. The weekend after Christmas, there's always significant bumps. That could be like something that we see here. I think, especially for Unhinged and New Mutants. New Mutants is a very good September, like It Chapter 1, where it's very much like back to school. October, like creepy kind of movie. New Mutants is very much like that.
Yeah.
I think it could find an audience. There's potential it won't. There's potential it's just going to completely. I think that could definitely happen, but I think it could actually find an audience. Same with Tenet. I think Tenet is definitely going to play.
Yeah, I think if there's someone who goes to see Tenet and in like a safe area where they can go to the movie theater and they feel safe going there, which there are probably going to be multiple places like that here in the US. If they really enjoy that experience and feel like going back again, I think New Mutants would probably be their next choice. So I think it could.
New Mutants or Unhinged. I think that New Mutants and Tenet do have a crossover audience. You're correct. So if you get a taste of one type of genre film, you might want to get another because you haven't had one. And like even when it comes to streaming options, I think the last sort of genre film would have been The Old Guard on Netflix.
Yeah, that or Project Power.
Project Power. Nobody watched Project Power. Sorry to say,
it was horrible
because it just looked really. It looked horrible. Jamie Foxx, you're better than that. So is Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
He definitely is.
But yeah, so you really haven't had an option for a very long time. You've had Umbrella Academy, but after that TV, you haven't had a movie for a very long time. Yeah. So I think that New Mutant, Tenet, and even Unhinged could see bumps in the next few weeks. But like moving to Tenet's overseas, how it did overseas, Tenet had a stronger than expected debut. I think in markets, it was about 10 markets that it debuted in. I think it was 10 or 11. And with a total of $53 million, leading in the UK as expected, for a Nolan film with $7.1 million. Not a lot, but for the UK, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So with the markets that it's already playing in, it's reasonable that Tenet could make about $95 to $120 million in these markets when all is said and done. So just these 11 markets, given that it's already made 50, and given that they're not too strong, there couldn't be a three times multiple. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Yeah. You could maybe see one or two. So that's why I'm thinking about $95 to $120 million. And that would be freaking amazing without the US or China, and without any other markets either.
Yeah.
But, so as far as its China debut, it's looking at an opening weekend of $25 to $40 million with an average of about $30 million and a final gross of $60 million to $95 million, with $85 million being the average. And I think if it overperforms there, I think that would be very good. I think that would be solid for the film.
Yeah, I do think that would be a good number for the film, as we saw with, I believe, the 800 a week or two ago in China. China and the Chinese audience is definitely interested in going back to see a film if it appeals to them enough. And they're semi-consistent with Nolan. I think the biggest Nolan film there was Interstellar. They really liked that film.
Why? It was terrible.
I like the film. But I do think it could do well in China. And I don't know. So in terms of worldwide, do you have any final gross predictions for its domestic and worldwide all combined?
I do. So assuming that Tenet overperforms in all of these markets, excluding the smaller ones, which I haven't added into the calculations that I did. So assuming it overperforms with the $120 million that I'm assuming it could make here, like in the UK and the 11 markets just opened it, assuming it makes $120 million in America, and assuming it makes, I think it was $95 million in China, I think that it's on track for a final projected worldwide gross of $335 million. And while that isn't enough for profit, it could potentially make up the $65 million difference between my projection and profitability, which is $400 million. If it overperforms in all of these smaller markets, like Israel and the rest of Asia, and even Latin America, if it ever hits there, because I know I don't think there's a release date planned yet. Oh. So it could overperform in those markets, and it could do better than expected in China and the US. But as for these markets, these 11 markets, I don't think it takes a very big movie to overperform. Like Venom and Mamma Mia 2 were like the biggest movies here in 2018. Those were the biggest movies of 2018.
Yeah.
A Star is Born as well. So it takes a certain urgency of the film, a click, and I don't think Tenet has a click, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so. I think maybe in terms of final worldwide predictions, I have it at around 400 maybe to like 425 million for its final gross, which would still be under the breaking even point. I don't know. The breaking even point is, I think, probably like 500 or 600 million.
Yeah, remember it came out, they said it was, someone said it was $800 million.
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, 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 it's $400 million.
Yeah.
I don't think it's 400 million. I don't think it could be as high as 800,
No.
but I think 550. Although, if they can just get the headline out there that we made $400 million, that's all they need. They just need that headline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty much, Warner Brothers knows that they're probably going to lose money on this. I think it's more, one, to please Nolan, and two, to please movie theaters, just to help them out during this time.
I will say, how much do you think Tenet needs to make sure that Wonder Woman, Black Widow, Bond, Soul, and Dune can still come out this year?
Considering two of those are Warner Brothers films, I honestly think if it hits 400 million, if it does better than they expected, which so far it is, I think they will expect the market to do better as hopefully this virus decreases, especially here in the US. I think both of those, if it hits anything above like 375, 350 million, I think those films are going to stay where they are. Black Widow,
I kind of agree with you. Yeah.
Black Widow, I think it depends on Mulan, how it's going to do this weekend. If Mulan is a huge hit this weekend, like it makes, I don't know how much an opening weekend for, this is kind of an unprecedented thing, but I don't know if they're even going to share the numbers, but if it does good, and the projections for Black Widow maybe aren't as ideal as they thought, they could put it on Disney Plus, but I think no matter what, you're always going to make more money in theaters, I think. I think New Mutants is making more money right now than it would if they debuted it on PVOD. So I think right now, I think they're going to stick to those dates. I don't know about Soul, though. That's also out there.
So if Mulan completely crushes it, all they need is 14 million Disney Plus subscribers, and then they have $400 million right there. They need 14 million Disney Plus subscribers to buy the film, and they have $400 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Mulan absolutely crushes it, I don't think Disney would stab theaters in the back unless they thought they really, really could, and there's such a huge opportunity. I don't think that they would unless they really, really saw that there. And I think that Soul would be the only candidate to go to PVOD, unfortunately. See, I was very upset. I thought Mulan looked like a very theater-worthy film. And while I don't think, I could honestly see myself watching Black Widow at home. I honestly could. I don't think it's going to happen because Marvel is just too, it's like their biggest brand. There's no way that they could do that.
Yeah.
Because there's too much of a curiosity factor, because it's the first major film after Avengers Endgame, including Spider-Man Far From Home, which was really tied to Avengers Endgame. So if Tenet bombs and Mulan does really well, I could see Soul going to Premier Access and Marvel just moving back everything by one again. It probably needs to do that with Black Panther 2 anyway, because of Chadwick Boseman's passing. They need to kind of probably restructure that film. It's tragic, but it probably is going to have to happen. Yeah. I could see that having to push back. 2022 was crowded for Marvel anyway, so I'd say they will more than likely just move Black Widow to February 2021.
Yeah, I think that it's regarding Soul, especially since the movies that they seem to be putting in theaters right now aren't family movies. I don't think families especially are going to be in a rush to go back to theaters, which may be why they put Mulan on Premier Access. So I do think that has a much better shot. But I don't know. Part of me thinks Disney maybe should have stuck it out with Mulan, especially with these Tenet numbers slowly coming in, and seeing how it did in theaters. Because I honestly think it may, if it came out sometime soon, make more in theaters than Mulan PVOD. Do you think they?
I think Mulan. Yeah. having seen Tenet, I genuinely think Mulan would have crushed Tenet. Like 110%, they would have crushed it. Because if you got irritated with Tenet, like I did, you would. I'm not sure if you had another option, you would probably take it. Like I had the option the other night, see New Mutants or see Tenet again, and I saw New Mutants, even though I hadn't seen New Mutants already, and I knew it was bad. I knew people didn't like it. I still went and saw that instead. If I had the option to see Mulan, I think absolutely anyone and everyone would. So I think a better model to do this with, it would have been premiere access and in theaters. I think they maybe should have done both. Like what Bill and Ted did. I really think Mulan could have proven even more so that there's an audience out there. However, I understand they don't want to put children at risk. No one wants to be the studio that made a child catch coronavirus. So I understand that decision. However, Mulan could have made bank. Like I really, really think that they could have made a lot of money.
Especially in the China market, I think. I don't know. I think it's still planned to come out theatrically in China. I don't know what the plan there is.
Oh, it's coming out everywhere in Asia because I'm not sure if anywhere there has Disney Plus. Japan doesn't have it. I don't think Korea has it. China doesn't have it yet. So I think they're all going to get it. And I think we're definitely going to see, because you see it all the time. They only really have enough bandwidth to support one major Hollywood movie a month. No, not one major Hollywood movie a month. One major Hollywood film a week. So I think that if Tenet comes out, does okay, I think Mulan will completely just eviscerate it. I really think that could happen because it's going to come out there September 10th. It's going to come out September 10th.
Okay.
Or it could have been put. I think I might have heard it was pushed back by one more week, but I really do think that Mulan could catch on like wildfire, especially because it's supposed to be really good, like what we're hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you add its China numbers maybe on top of its Disney Plus numbers, there's a chance it could break even. But who knows?
Yeah.
I know that budget is definitely lower than the Tenet budget, which is crazy. I don't know how Tenet costs that much, but I think it.
I do know. I've seen the film. I could definitely see how it cost $200 million.
Yeah.
But if I was WB, I'd be like, you want to use this script for $200 million?
Yeah.
I'd say, I'll do it for you, but please rewrite that script, please.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's not a film that deserves its budget, but I think the visuals, 110%, I think that they are groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. They're the only part of the film that are truly groundbreaking. And I wish the rest of it was.
Yeah. Especially, I forget what I was going to say. Never mind. Oh, wait, yes. Nolan.
So I think it's pretty safe.
Yes. Nolan is also getting 20% of the cut. So that's also crazy.
Oh, my God. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
It should really be more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say next weekend is going to determine the path that Hollywood takes for years. And it is a huge, huge, huge deal.
It is. Totally. Do you think if Tenet is big and surprises everyone, do you think any of these other movie studios could move movies back into 2020? Like A Quiet Place 2 or Top Gun Maverick?
I had thought that if New Mutants really overperformed, like if New Mutants had done maybe $12 to $15 million, that could have maybe turned some heads. Mm-hmm. But I think New Mutants proved that if you're just an average film, I don't think you can truly survive or thrive. I think you really have to have a big reason, a big hook. I think that Tenet has Christopher Nolan. Wonder Woman 1984 has DC. I think Dune has like amazing visuals, like a huge potential to it. I think that Black Widow has Marvel. And again, I think those are the only films that warrant it. I'm not sure if James Bond has a huge hook. I'm not sure if Soul has a huge hook. I think it's very smart. I think that The King's Man recently moved. And I think that film's going to die wherever it goes. I think it's going to truly bomb. It could maybe, like if it's the type of film that would survive in a thriving market, I don't think it's the type of film that could restart one. Same with New Mutants. New Mutants probably would have thrived, as I said, $28 million near Dark Phoenix before COVID. I don't think it's the type of film to really try and breathe new life into a new market. I think that was a bit of a mistake. As for films that could potentially move back, I'm not sure if there's a lot of room to kind of move that around. You could maybe, like plop something after Thanksgiving and before something like Free Guy, but we have Free Guy, you know. I think we can only truly support one big movie every few weeks, and thankfully that's what we have for a while. It's one big movie every few weeks. After Tenet, it's Wonder Woman 1984, and then Death on the Nile. We also have Candyman before that.
Yeah.
Candyman, I think, in between those two, because it moved to, I think it moved to October, didn't it?
Yes, it moved from September to October, I think.
Yeah, so it's Tenet, Wonder Woman, Candyman, Death on the Nile, Black Widow, Soul, Bond, Free Guy, and Dune. And that's all that's left. And I truly think that if Tenet is big, that's all that can really stay here, because I think New Mutants and Unhinged proved that there's a very small audience that will go and see every movie. But I don't think that warrants bringing back something like A Quiet Place, which has its new date, and I don't think should risk moving again in case people stop caring.
Yeah, I think most of those films are going to do better in their 2021 dates anyway, just because I think the market is going to be doing better then. So I don't see, especially since you already put all the effort into moving it and telling everyone that it's far away, of bringing it back. I think the current slate is at the right amount of movies.
Yeah, we have 9. We have 9 major films.
Which is good for now, I think.
Yeah, so hopefully Tenet can set the stage for a revival, a very slow revival, and then 2021 could maybe pick things up a bit. And hopefully by summer there won't be limited capacity. There won't be a need for social distancing, and there won't be a need for masks. There will, hopefully by summer 2021, we will have the experience back as it is. That could be a bit ambitious for me to say, but we can all live in hope. And I think that if that happens, the market will truly return to normal.
Well, I think that's a good way to end this episode. Maybe back sometime soon to go over Tenet's box office. And I guess we'll occasionally have an episode here or there. I guess not the next one until Wonder Woman. But if you want more content like this, please feel free to like the video and subscribe. And that is the end of this episode.